Love is blind, or so we are told. It's a universal human experience, widely accepted as a fundamental need alongside food, shelter, and water. It's often mythologized as something ever-present and universally accessible that fate will lead us to, but who gets to believe that love will simply find them? In my talk tonight, I aim to challenge this idea and explore whether love is instead a resource that is subject to privilege and therefore unevenly distributed, with some people assumed to deserve it, while others must constantly prove themselves worthy of it. In order to explore this, let's start by assessing love through the lens of some of the common hallmarks of privilege. First up, privilege not only determines who gets access to resources, but it also compounds, meaning that an initial unearned advantage also attracts further benefits and opportunities. As a non-loved-based example, someone who has had a lot of social capital will be more likely to have access to a good education and will be better connected to access high-paid jobs. Status attracts status, which really challenges the idea of success, whether that's in the job market or in dating, being based on individual merit alone. How does this play out in the world of love? Well, we are often led to believe that if we just put ourselves out there and just be ourselves, then love will find us. This assumes that if we are simply good enough, then it's a level playing field out there, when in reality, access to love is socially determined more than individually earned. Desirability is highly influenced by social status, with those holding the most status generally being seen as more lovable. Being deemed desirable because of your alignment with society's dominant norms means that you are more likely to find love. Being loved by someone can build your confidence and your sense of self-worth, which then makes you more lovable, more desirable, and so on. Love, therefore, doesn't only reflect desirability, it amplifies it. So far, I focus on how privilege determines access to love. But what about the uneven distribution of privilege that starts way before we start dating? Our earliest experiences of emotional security or lack thereof have a huge impact on our ability to love and be loved. Secure attachment is not the default that it should be, and it is also not evenly distributed, making it one of the most powerful forms of privilege that we can carry into adulthood. The positive news here, though, is that you don't have to be raised in an environment with lots of social capital. You need consistent experiences of being loved and being cared for. However, as a dear friend once said to me, when we are not fed love on a silver spoon, we learn to lick it off knives. In other words, early love shapes not just how safe we feel, but how possible love feels later, and what we might be willing to tolerate to experience it. This leads us on to the next hallmark of privilege that I'd like to explore, and that is that it's invisible to those who have it. Privilege often feels like it's just the way things are to those who have it. It can make it hard for us to notice or understand the challenges that others face. It means not having to worry as much about whether we'll find love and the other things it gives us access to, like affection and intimacy, a sense of security, building a future with someone, and social legitimacy. If you have plenty of opportunities to meet new people because of your strong social circle and social skills, if you've never had to wonder whether your ethnicity is impacting the number of matches you make on dating apps, or whether that person ghosted you because you told them about your health condition, then you hold some privilege when it comes to accessing love. Privilege affords us grace to be imperfect and yet still be chosen. Why does this matter? Because to those who lack privilege, it is usually very visible and deeply felt. To not find love when we want to can feel like personal failure. There can be a huge emotional cost to those who experience this that is further reinforced by messages that they need to just try harder to be desirable. This challenge to their sense of self-worth keeps people feeling as though there is something fundamentally wrong with them as an individual, which leads to shame, which in turn often leads to violence, turned inward or outward. When love is lost or absent, we always return to power and attempts to control and to influence the things that we can. Some historians even argue that marriage and sexual exclusivity within it helped stabilise societies by preventing large numbers of excluded men from building resentment. Whether or not that is fully true, it does raise a question: what does happen in a society when large numbers of people feel locked out of love? I think we are seeing this play out now in our virtually hyper-connected but tangibly isolated society. The invisibility of privilege also shows up in some of the expectations and assumptions people have about being in a loving relationship. Did you grow up having relationships like yours portrayed in stories, songs, TV and films? Do you feel free to express affection or even talk about your relationship in public without fear of judgment, discrimination or even violence? Would you be able to visit your partner in the hospital without question? These are all privileges that not everyone in love experiences. Some forms of love are often invalidated and minimised, such as queer love, non-monogamous love, platonic love, and love that arises out of practical necessity rather than romance. In non-monogamy, the term couples privilege refers to the additional perks that primary partners have, such as social legitimacy, legal recognition, and being the default plus one. The label is not there to make these things bad, but to make them visible so that the impacts can be considered. What's interesting is that we rarely apply the same honesty outside of non-monogamy in terms of the hierarchies we place on the different types of relationships we're in. The third and final hallmark that I'll talk about tonight is that privilege persists. If love is a resource that is subject to privilege, then that privilege wouldn't disappear once you access love. It would exist within it too. It would shape how love is experienced within a relationship. As I referenced earlier in my talk, our early experiences of being loved inform the emotional foundations and attachment styles that we bring into our relationships. Love is vulnerable and risky. To engage with it fully requires a baseline of safety and security, and that doesn't show up equally for everyone. For some, vulnerability is a little awkward but exhilarating. For others, it's dangerous. For some, being rejected is something that they can take in their stride, or at worst, it stings a little. For others, rejection will feel as though the whole world is collapsing around them. To be able to grow and expand through love, we need those solid foundations to be in place. Those who have less privilege in society and in their relationships are often required to trust more and to take greater risks in a world that might have taught them that it's not always safe to do so. Oppression in other areas of life can often look like giving beyond your means and not having access to the resources you need. In love and relationships, the same can apply. Someone with low capacity and little security in their life is much more likely to override their own needs and their nervous system to stay in a relationship. Imagine this. Your income disappears tomorrow. Your partner's doesn't. If a conflict emerges between the two of you, who has more capacity to hold their ground? Privilege informs whose needs get centred by default, who backs down first in a conflict, who shapes their life to fit into the others, and who does the most emotional labour. When we assume that being in a loving relationship makes us equal, when we deny the presence of privilege here, we risk the person with the least capacity giving the most. We therefore allow love to not only reflect power, but to reinforce it over and over again. So who gets centred in your relationships and why? And where might you have benefited from having greater capacity than a partner? If you find yourself in a loving relationship that is stable, socially validated and resourced, then you have surplus relational power. As I've said, privilege is often invisible to those who have it, but this surplus of relational power shows up in other ways that can be seen and felt, such as boredom, restlessness, or a sense that something is missing even in a secure relationship. The question isn't whether that feeling is right or wrong, it's what we do with the capacity it reveals. Do you use this disenchantment to cheat or walk away? Or do you see it for what it is, a cue to re-engage our imagination, to connect more fully to the world around us? We can create more tension and excitement within a secure relationship. If these 3 hallmarks hold up, and I think they do, then we can't keep idealising love as something that we can all just tap into whenever we want. We can't keep pretending that love transcends power. We have to start acknowledging the power that we have and the responsibility that we have to use that power for good. Many of us default to trying to hoard this power within the relationship. It seems like the natural thing to do, but I believe that there is a better option. If we think of this relational power like other forms of power, where can we use an individual surplus to benefit the collective? Where can you use your power generated here in your relationship to benefit your social circles and communities? Who can you help out? Who can you protect? Who could you offer companionship to when they're feeling the ache of loneliness? How could you support someone to build stronger foundations of safety and security that will then make love more accessible to them? If there's one idea that consistently hits home when I teach people about power, it's that underutilising our power is a misuse of power too. So can you let love increase your empathy and care, not only within your relationships but beyond them? When we see love as generative, we can use love as the resource it is to empower us and give us capacity to do good in the world, to be brave on behalf of others, and to open our hearts and our minds enough to sit with different perspectives. Love may or may not be blind, but if love generates power, then it also generates possibility. Once we recognise this, we can take more responsibility, not only for who we love, but for what love empowers us to do in the world. Thank you.